The night Marguerite found out, she was standing in the middle of a hotel lobby in Chicago, holding a gift she'd bought for her husband. It was a watch, engraved on the back. "For every minute you work hard, I'm proud of you." She had driven 40 minutes out of her way to pick it up from the jeweler before catching her flight home a day early. She wanted to surprise him. That was the word she kept turning over in her mind afterward. Surprise, and how funny the universe is about. Who actually ends up surprised? The conference had ended Thursday instead of Friday. A scheduling change. Something about the keynote speaker having a family emergency. Marguerite Hollins had been gone 6 days, and she was tired in the way that has nothing to do with sleep. The kind of tired that comes from smiling at strangers and answering questions and being on for nearly a week straight. She wanted her couch. She wanted her dog. She wanted her husband, Devin, who had texted her that morning. "Miss you. Can't wait for you to get home. Crazy week at the firm. 2 major closings back to back. Haven't slept properly since Tuesday." She had texted back a heart. She had texted back almost home. The hotel lobby was the lobby of the Alderton Grand on Michigan Avenue, which is where Marguerite and 3 colleagues had been staying for the Urban Planning Summit. She was waiting for her Uber when she saw him. It takes the brain a moment to process something it isn't expecting. She saw the gray blazer first, the one she'd given Devin for his birthday, the one with the slightly unusual stitching at the lapels, that she had specifically noticed because she'd almost chosen a different one. Then she saw his profile. Then she saw the woman beside him. The woman had her hand on his arm the way women touch men when they are comfortable with them. Not a friendly touch, a familiar one. The kind that has muscle memory behind it. Devin had his head tilted toward hers, laughing at something. His whole body was angled toward her like a plant toward sunlight. Marguerite had not seen him angle himself toward her like that in longer than she could immediately remember. They were walking toward the elevator bank. Marguerite did not move. She was aware of the gift bag in her hand. She was aware of the concierge desk to her left, and the sound of piano music from somewhere deeper in the lobby, and the faint smell of whatever they pipe through hotel ventilation systems to make guests feel like they've arrived somewhere worth being. She did not call his name. She did not walk toward him. She stood behind a pillar. She was not hiding. Exactly. She would tell herself later. She was processing, and she watched her husband of 11 years press the button for the elevator, while the woman leaned into him and said something against his shoulder. The doors opened. They stepped in. The doors closed. Marguerite Hollins stood in the lobby of the Alderton Grand Hotel for what felt like a very long time. Her Uber driver sent a message. "I'm outside. Blue Honda." She walked out to the blue Honda. She got in. She said, "O'Hare, please." And she rode the entire 40 minutes to the airport without saying another word. With a wrapped watch on her lap that she would not give to anyone. She had met Devin Hollins at a mutual friend's housewarming party in 2012. He was a real estate attorney. Even then, sharp and confident in a way that read as ambition rather than arrogance. He made her laugh that night within the first 10 minutes, which she would later say was the only thing she'd ever really required from a man before she'd allow herself to fall for him. He had followed up with a text the next morning. He was persistent without being aggressive. He remembered things. What she'd said about her sister, what she'd ordered to drink, the name of the company she'd just started working for. Marguerite had been careful her whole life. She grew up watching her parents navigate money like it was a live wire. Her father a man who believed that spending freely was the same as living fully. Her mother a woman who kept a separate savings account her father didn't know about until he needed it. That image, her mother, quiet and prepared, pulling resources from somewhere she'd protected, had lodged itself somewhere behind Marguerite's sternum and never fully left. She was an urban planner. She made good money. She had, over the years, been deliberately thoughtful about how she managed it. Not secretive, exactly, but careful. She had accounts Devin knew about, and accounts she considered hers alone, not out of distrust, but because her mother had raised her to believe that a woman without her own financial foundation was a woman who had handed the steering wheel to someone else. She had never told Devin about the inheritance. Her grandmother had died in 2019 and left Marguerite $240,000 because her grandmother had also watched her own mother keep a separate account and believed the lesson was worth passing down through generations. Marguerite had put it in an investment account and said nothing. Not because she was planning to leave, because she was raised to be prepared. Devin knew about the joint account. He knew about her salary. He knew about her 401 eng. He did not know about the rest. She had not thought about it much until the elevator doors closed in the lobby of the Alderton Grand. She thought about it on the flight home. The thing about discovering your husband is not where he said he was, is that it does something very specific to time. It doesn't slow time down exactly. It more like erases backward. Every text he'd sent during the week she was away suddenly looked different in retrospect. Every miss you and crazy week at the firm became a thing she had to hold up to light and re-examine. She thought about the past month, and then the past 6 months, and then, against her will, the past few years. She thought about the conference in Dallas 2 years ago when he'd come home and said he'd won a firm dinner, but couldn't take her because it was last minute. She thought about the Saturday morning in March when he said he was at the gym until noon and came home without looking like someone who had been at the gym. She thought about how he'd started being private with his phone in a way that had seemed insignificant at the time. Just a slight body shift. When she walked behind him, a screen dimmed a little faster than usual. Things she had attributed to nothing, because she did not want to attribute them to something. She was a detail person. It was her job to notice things, infrastructure, flow, the way spaces functioned or failed to function. She had noticed these things about Devon, and filed them under nothing, because sometimes love asks you to be deliberately unobservant, and she had been willing to pay that cost. She was no longer willing. She landed at O'Hare at 9:47 p.m. She took a cab home because she needed the quiet, the way she always needed the quiet after too many days around too many people. Devon's car was in the driveway. The lights in the bedroom were on. She sat in the cab at the end of her own street for 2 full minutes before asking the driver to go ahead and pull up. She walked in through the side door. Their dog, a 7-year-old beagle named Waffles, padded over immediately and pressed his face against her knee. She knelt down and held him for a moment longer than usual. "Hey." Devon appeared from the hallway, in a t-shirt and sweatpants, hair slightly damp. He looked exactly like a man who had just gotten home from a long week. "I didn't hear you come in. I thought your flight was tomorrow?" "Conference ended early," she said. "Speaker had a family thing." "Oh." He crossed the kitchen and kissed her cheek. "Good timing, then." She noticed that he did not ask why she hadn't texted him. She noticed that he pulled his phone from his sweatpants pocket and glanced at the screen as he turned toward the refrigerator. "You hungry?" he said. "I ordered Thai. There's leftovers." "I ate at the airport," she said. She went upstairs. She unpacked her bag with methodical slowness. She brushed her teeth. She lay in bed beside her husband of 11 years and stared at the ceiling while he fell asleep within 20 minutes. The way men can when their conscience is apparently not keeping them awake. She did not sleep until almost 3. In the morning, she made coffee and she thought. Marguerite Hollins was not a woman who made decisions while emotional. She had learned early that the most important choices in her life, professional, financial, personal, had been made in the quiet spaces after the feeling passed, when she could see the board clearly. This was one of those times when she needed to see the board clearly. She knew what she had seen. She was not questioning what she had seen. A woman who second-guesses her own 2 eyes is a woman who has been trained to distrust herself, and she refused to be that woman. She was not going to confront him. Not yet. Not without knowing exactly what she was walking into. She called her closest friend, a woman named Jonquil, who had been a divorce attorney for 14 years, and who answered the phone on the second ring, because she always answered on the second ring. "I need to know some things," Marguerite said, "about how this works." She did not have to explain more than 3 sentences before Jonquil said, "Come to my office at noon." She went to Jonquil's office at noon. She sat across from her oldest friend in a room full of legal files and potted succulents, and she laid out what she knew, flatly and without crying, because she had decided she was done crying about this particular situation before she'd even fully begun. Jonquil asked her several questions. She answered them. By the time she left the office 2 hours later, she understood how to protect herself. She understood what documentation she would need. She understood the difference between what was hers and what was shared, and she had spent enough years being her mother's daughter to know that she already had more of the former than Devon realized. She did not tell Devon she'd gone to see Jonquil. She came home and made pasta and they ate dinner, and he told her about the 2 property closings. And she nodded in the right places and said, "That sounds exhausting." And he said it really was. And she watched his mouth move and thought about all the places that mouth had been that she hadn't authorized. The next thing she needed was information. She was not going to hire someone. She had thought about it and decided against it. not because she couldn't afford it, but because she did not want anyone else in the architecture of this. She was also not going to go through his phone. The moment she touched his phone without his knowledge was the moment she handed him a narrative he could use against her. What she did instead was pay attention. She paid attention to his schedule in a way she hadn't in years. She noticed that Wednesdays were consistent. He always had a reason to be somewhere else on Wednesday evenings. Client dinner, late meeting, a colleague's retirement drinks. It was always something, and the something was always plausible enough that she had never questioned it. She noticed that he occasionally received calls he took in the garage. She noticed that he had started using a fitness app that logged his location when he ran, and that on the Wednesdays in question, his running logs were always conspicuously incomplete. She noticed one Sunday afternoon, when he left his laptop open on the kitchen counter and went upstairs to take a call, that there was an email thread open on the screen. She did not go looking. She simply stood in her kitchen and read what was visible, which was enough. The woman's name was Taryn. She worked at a competing firm. The email thread was professional in its language and devastating in its subtext. The kind of exchange that is technically about work and functionally about nothing professional whatsoever. Marguerite poured herself a glass of water. She refilled the dog's bowl. She went into the garden and deadheaded the marigolds along the back fence until Devin came downstairs and announced he was going to grab groceries. She said, "Pick up coffee filters if you're going." He said he would. He did not. Over the next 3 weeks, she did several things quietly and without announcement. She moved a significant portion of money from the joint account into an account of her own. Not all of it. Nothing that would be noticed immediately, and nothing that wasn't legally hers. She spoke with Jonquil twice more. She began photographing financial documents she kept in the home office. Mortgage statements, investment, summaries, his business account information that she had peripheral access to through shared tax filings. She called her sister, Beatrice, who lived in Portland, and who had always had a slightly better read on Devin than Marguerite had wanted to admit. Beatrice said, "I know," in a voice that meant she had known for longer than she was going to say right now, and Marguerite appreciated that she didn't push it. She did not cry on the phone with Beatrice. She cried in the shower, which is where she permitted herself to feel things she wasn't ready to feel in front of anyone, including herself. She cried for the version of the marriage she had believed in. She cried for the 11 years of dinners and vacations and Sunday mornings, and the way he used to reach for her hand at movies without thinking about it. She cried for the woman she had been when she said "I do," who was earnest in a way she would never fully recover, who had walked down an aisle genuinely convinced that the man at the end of it was the one who would never make her feel like this. And then she turned off the water and she dried off, and she went back to building what came next. The night she finally moved, it was a Thursday. She had been ready for 2 weeks. Everything was in order. The account, the documents, the conversation with Jonquil about the next steps, the call she'd had with a realtor friend about a short-term rental in Lincoln Park that was available immediately. She had a bag packed and stored in her office at work because she did not trust herself to have it in the house without him noticing. And Devin Hollins noticed very little. But she was not going to give him the opportunity. She had chosen Thursday because he had a work event on Thursday evenings. He would be gone by 6 and home by 9 or 10, and by then she intended to be well on her way. He left the house at 5:45. She watched his car reverse out of the driveway from the upstairs window. She called a moving company, a small one, 2 men she'd hired through a service Jonquil recommended, and they arrived at 6:15 and were efficient and professional and asked no questions. She took what was hers. The furniture they'd bought together she left. Her grandmother's chest of drawers she took. The artwork she'd brought into the marriage she took. The dog she absolutely took. She had paid every single vet bill for 7 years, and Devin was allergic to pet dander anyway, which had always been a detail she found quietly amusing. She left the house at 8:22 p.m. She did not leave a note. She had considered a note and then decided against it, because a note is an invitation for a conversation. And she was not interested in having a conversation in the driveway or over the phone at 11 p.m. when he came home to an altered house. She had already arranged for Jonquil's office to contact him in the morning. He would understand everything then. He would understand it at a time of her choosing, in a format of her choosing, with a lawyer's name on the envelope instead of hers. She drove to Lincoln Park with waffles in the back seat and the windows down because it was a warm night and she wanted air. The apartment was on the third floor of a yellow brick building on a tree-lined street. It was small, significantly smaller than the house, but it had tall windows and good light and a little balcony, where she immediately imagined having coffee in the mornings. The property manager had left the key under the mat per Marguerite's arrangement. She let herself in, set her bag down on the floor, and stood in the empty living room. Waffles investigated the perimeter and then sat down in a stripe of lamplight from the window and looked at her. "I know," she said. "It's different." He thumped his tail twice. She sat down on the floor beside him. Not dramatically. She wasn't collapsing. She just wanted to sit on the floor for a minute and not be in motion. She'd been in motion for weeks, maybe longer. She had been moving through something without stopping to feel the weight of it. And now she was in a quiet room with her dog. And she allowed herself 1 full minute of just sitting with what this was. Then she got up, and she unpacked her bag, and she put her grandmother's quilt on the bed, and she made herself a cup of tea with the electric kettle she'd also absolutely taken. Her phone lit up at 10:14 p.m. She looked at the screen. It was Devin calling. She turned the phone face down and let it ring. She picked up the tea. She went to the window. Outside, the street was lit in that particular amber way that Chicago does at night. Warm and specific in hers. A couple walked below with a stroller. A man jogged past in a reflective vest. Someone's wind chimes were going somewhere she couldn't see. The phone rang twice more and then went silent. She would not answer it that night, or the next night. Every response she owed him would be given through Jonquil's office, in writing, with proper documentation, because she was her mother's daughter and her grandmother's granddaughter. And the women in her family had long understood that the way you leave something tells the story of who you are. She left with her finances intact, her name on no debt she hadn't agreed to. Her children. She did not have children yet, but she planned to, someday, with someone who deserved to be their father. Her dog, her grandmother's furniture, and the understanding that she had not made a single reactive decision in the past 3 weeks that she would later regret. She had been methodical. She had been quiet. She had been, in the truest sense, prepared. The watch she'd bought at the jeweler's on Michigan Avenue was still in her coat pocket. She'd been carrying it around for weeks, and she hadn't known what to do with it. That night, in the apartment, she took it out of the gift bag and held it in her palm. "For every minute you work hard. I'm proud of you." She turned it over. It was a good watch. The jeweler had done a nice job on the engraving. In the morning, she would take it back and ask if they could re-engrave it. She hadn't decided with what yet, but she would think of something. Tonight she set it on the windowsill, and she finished her tea, and she went to bed. She slept until 7 without waking. The first full night of sleep she'd had in a month. In a room that smelled like someone else's cleaning products and fresh possibility. With a beagle pressed against her feet, and streetlight coming through curtains she had yet to pick out. In a life that was, for the first time in a very long time, entirely and only hers.